Hi everyone, welcome to Time to React. Hope you're all well, keeping safe. Just wanted to run you through a bit of the running order for tonight's event. So my name is Duncan Goldie. If you don't know that already, I work at Woodrow Mercer Technology. It's a technical recruitment company. We put together obviously these meetups. It's a great way of just sort of being able to network with people. The main thing I like about these meetups is the community aspect and really just sort of being able to talk to people and get to know people and talk about React, talk about engineering, talk about beer, wine, whatever it is we normally talk about at these events. Obviously this is a slightly different format whereby it's obviously remote. However, I'd still really like to speak to as many of you as possible. So we are going to be hosting live Q&As with our speakers this evening. But if you do have any questions that you wanted to ask me, fire away in the comments section, and then I'll either come back to you on there or I will be live myself as well. So I'll be able to answer any of your questions. I've also shot my contact details in there if you did want to sort of ask me any questions about the market. I know it's pretty, with IR35 and everything like that was due to be happening, which was disrupting a lot of your guys' contracts and earning potential. And then that was suddenly taken away. And now we have this. I know it's a really, really sort of unusual time out there, particularly for those of you who are looking for a new role. So yeah, feel free to have a chat with me. I can give you kind of a bit more of an understanding over the overall market. But yeah, I mean, for the time being, let's just talk about React. So yeah, tonight we're going to be starting off with our three speakers, or that's the whole event really. But yeah, we're going to be hearing from Kristian Mandrup, who's a very experienced CTO and lead React engineer. He's going to be talking us through Monolith or modules. He's put together a talk for us, and I don't think he's done it in this format before, so be kind to him, but I'm sure it'll be a really, really good talk. Then we've got Georgiadis. He is a very, very experienced leader within the React community, but he's also hosted or presented at many different meetups and tech conferences and stuff like that in the past. So a few of you might be aware of George. We're really lucky to be able to have him talking to us this evening, and then obviously you can get involved and ask him some live Q&As as well. So feel free to pick his brains, which I'm sure he's very, very used to. So feel free to fire away. And then we've got Praveen Kumar. So Praveen, again, very experienced React engineer. He's actually been a React.js contributor, and he's in the top 0.05% on Stack Overflow. So I know that there's a few of you who are up there, but we're in good company tonight. So yeah, those guys are going to be sort of firing over the presentations to you. Please do get involved as much as possible. Please do share this talk if there's anyone that you know of that you think might be interested in this event. The talks individually will be posted on YouTube afterwards, but you can rewatch the whole event as well at a time that you like. So without much further ado, and with the assistance from Alex and all the team over at Pusher, who we really couldn't be doing this without, so thanks very much to them. I will hand you over to the first presenter of the evening, and I'll speak to you in a little bit. So enjoy.
Hi, my name is Georgiadis. I am based in London at the moment. I have worked for many companies such as John Lewis, Metrobank, GiftCaf, Quidco, Utility Warehouse, and many more. Additionally, I am the founder of CMSdriven.io, the only CMS tool for React applications. Welcome to my presentation. We are going to talk about how to write reusable UI components like professionals. First of all, let's discuss about what a React component is. Components are the building blocks of any React app. A typical React app will have many of these. To put it simply, a component is a JavaScript class or function that accepts inputs and return React element that describes how the section of a UI should appear. A component consists of two parts. The first is how it looks, the UI, and the second is how it works, the user experience, or how we call it UX. Now, if you gather all the UI components of an app under one package or module, this is a UI component library. There are two options out there regarding how you break them down. You can break down a component into the smallest atom, like buttons, radio buttons, inputs, etc. Or you can break them down to block elements. A block element is usually a combination of two or more smaller components. If you decide to break down your components into the smallest atom possible, you'll realize very quickly that there are some pros and cons. The good thing about this is that your component behaves predictably, and also that you can test the UI using just snapshots. This way you can be sure that you cannot break anything on your UI, because your test will cover all the cases. Now, some cons if you take this approach. One of them is that it takes a lot of effort to code all the possible states of your buttons. Hover state, disable state, and so on. Is it time consuming? You will not be able to reuse your designs into another new framework or library. Last but not least, you especially create a wrapper component over the native API. What I mean, you pass on-click callback from the button component that you just create to the native DOM element that has a click callback capability by itself. So you are just creating another layer that is not necessarily. You create layers when you have a custom business logic to implement normally. So let's face it, we live in a fast-paced environment where everything changes so quickly. Imagine a scenario where you will have to rewrite your application into a new X library next year. You will have to rewrite everything from scratch. Even so, we developers love to rewrite code. This behavior can hurt a business. When we choose to make a decision about architecting a new application, we should be conscious about creating a solution that will last for a long time. Sometimes we might leave the company, but we will still leave a legacy behind. This must be something that we will be proud of. Now, if we take the two approaches and we put some name on those, we can call the first CSS approach and the second CSS in JavaScript. Now, the first approach, the pure CSS way, is a straightforward approach of cascade styles that can be distributed independently as a third library, and it's easier to read and understand. On the other hand, CSS in JavaScript offers by default class name prefixing and reduces the file size, as CSS styles that are not needed are automatically removed from the code. Again, the issue with the latest approach is that you can restrict yourself into a specific technology. What is better? It all depends on your personal circumstances. Some projects might require a common style guide to be built, which is going to be shared across different projects that use varied technologies. It might be the case that your project is going to be locked into one technology only, and this is fine because it was a result of a well-thought decision. Sometimes locking into one technology can make sense. Let me put it this way. If 3 years from now you decide to go with another library, your styling will probably be outdated too. So you might need to rewrite the styling itself instead of keep it as it is and just change the library. Although it might be a case that your work is a massive corporation and rewriting the whole app is not an option. Okay, now that we have a common understanding on these matters, at least we know that we have to put in a common place our components or our pure CSS, and we need a website where members from all the team can look and understand the components by its name and its attributes. In this example, we can see a CSS style guide with typography in different sizes, font weights, buttons in various states like hover, disabled, etc. If we go with the approach of creating a component library for every element, my suggestion is to use something called Storybook. Storybook is an open source tool for developing UI components in isolation. It works with React, Vue, Angular, and more. It makes building standing UI organized and efficient. Storybook provides a sandbox to build UI components in isolation, so you can develop hard-to-read states and edge cases. So Storybook should be treated as a single source of truth for your components. It's the only place that the whole team can get engaged, even if they are UI, UX, product owners, developers, testers, etc. Now, let's talk about where you should host your UI components library. You can always create a reusable component library and host it in a different NPM package. Even though this looks as the obvious path to go, it might not be the best way to start off. The reason is simple. When you start your first UI component library, the only consumer of this library is probably going to be one project, the project that you start off initially. If you remove the UI component and you put it outside of the main consumer project, you will have to handle versioning, a lot of Git commits, Git pushes, additional CI/CD setup, and more. Plus, the fact that you are doing something based on assumptions, the assumption that you are going to need it at some point to be reusable, it might be a case that you're not going to need it after all. And this is described by the Yagni principle. So Yagni principle tells us that we shouldn't do things upfront if we are not going to need them immediately. And this is because, as we said, you might not going to need it after 1 year, and you have to be very focused on what you do right now initially. Okay, what you can do instead is to create a UI component library inside your project, but in a way that you won't create any hard dependencies. And then at some point, another potential consumer project appears, you can extract the UI component library and deploy it independently. For corporate environments, it could be deployed into an external Nexus NPM repository, so you can guarantee a maximum security. When building a UI component library, you will find that it takes a lot of time to build all the components. You have to ask yourself as a project architect, are our designs matching an existing component library such as Material UI, Bootstrap, Foundation, or anything else that is already made and tested in terms of usability and accessibility and more? If your designs are a little bit different from those libraries, my suggestion is to use these libraries instead of creating your own from scratch. is going to save you a lot of time and is already tested. We know that it works under different browsers, it's accessible, etc., etc. Now, if your designs are entirely different from these libraries, my suggestion is not to use them at all. Because if you use these libraries, you will have to make many changes. This will not only create a mess in your code from countless overrides, it will also take the same amount of time as if you had to build it from scratch. Okay, now let's talk about UI components. Now that we talk about UI components, let's take a look on some issues that happen on software development teams today. First of all, devs, we don't like making content changes. It will be great if we could only focus on complex stuff, build complicated UI components, and leave the content changes to a non-tech people. Every time a product owner asks a developer to make a change, this could take some time, especially in big corporations. This is due to required extra code changes and bureaucracies, especially when we talk about small copy changes that we need to roll out immediately, or things we want to turn on and off very quickly. We remove a component and we appear it after a period of time. In a web development department, there are two levels of people. There are the technical people and the non-technical. The technical is developers, CTOs, tech leads. Non-technical are product owners, copywriters, UI UX designers. Non-tech people within a company feel helpless, waiting for every single change to be done by developers. It will be nice if we have a way to bridge the gap between them. Developing front-end applications is more complicated now than ever. Developers must spend significant time and effort to write code for everything. Page URLs, titles, meta descriptions, keywords, content and business logic are all hard-coded. Additionally, you have to create unnecessary page components, higher order components, just to define the order in which UI components appear, and then configure the URL routes to that page. Managers delivering less tasks for the business, and developers waste their valuable time making simple code and changes. All developers really want is to build reusable UI components like Legos, and let anybody in the team create and edit pages at runtime, fast and easy. That's why I built CMS Driven. With CMS Driven, you can create a reusable component library of building blocks and share them with your product owner, UI UX designer. You can allow anybody in the team to build new pages at runtime. They just need to import the reusable components directly from the online component library. Now, with CMS Driven, there is no any way that any change in the way you're building your components today. So no additional code is needed. This makes your existing components compatible with this tool. You can use Redux, React hooks, Context API, and pretty much anything. So instead of hard coding everything to your page, you can just use props. That way the CMS Driven can dynamically change the content, images, and even the business logic where you want to. This way, companies can minimize development costs, and developers, they can spend their time in tasks that really matter for them. And now, when a user visits your website, the CMS Driven plugin, NPM plugin, decides if the route is a hard-coded page or a CMS page. If it is a CMS page, CMS-driven automatically renders the components into a specific order and populates the right data into the component props. With CMS-driven, you can edit everything to the page: URLs, titles, meta descriptions, keywords. And you can also add, remove, and reorder the components on a page and edit their props at runtime. So I'm going to show you right now how it works. First of all, you're going to need to have a free account with CMS Driven. And then you have to log into admin panel, and the first thing we are going to see here is the component library. So I have connected CMS Driven with my storybook. So all those are real components that you can interact with them. So I can even click the buttons here. I can scroll, I can click these buttons. So these are real components again, and they are pulled from my storybook. So let's try to edit the product list component. Okay, so the product list component. Every UI component must have a name here, product list. This is the name exactly as it is on your code base. So this is a proper UI component, no change from your side. This is the way you have built it, and then you just register it here. So we need to know the name, and then we need to know the props of this component. As you can see here in this specific product list component, we have props called products. Products here, this one. Products is an array of objects, and in every object we have a title, paragraph, image, etc. So after we register our component, now this is available for anyone to have access to this, and everybody in the team can identify by its name and how it looks like that this component is already exists, and therefore we can reuse it. So UI UX teams can design the new pages using this common style guide. Okay. So next thing, let's have a look on the environments. Because CMS driven works perfectly in multiple environments, you can first create a page in your local and then deploy it to a test environment. As we can see here, we can create a page into a local and then deploy it to staging. Okay, now you can decide about your pipelines. There is no any rule here, so you can make up your own path to live. It's essential here to understand that this is not a deployment of your code. It is a deployment of a model and the content of your page. You still own the code base, and you're still able to deploy it anywhere you want to. Let's have a look inside here. So we can see we have an access token, and this is used for when you make calls from an API, if you need to make calls from an API, and you can say that this is a default environment and this is protected. So you can decide if this is a protected environment. For example, if your environment is a production, you might want only admins to deploy here, but this is entirely up to you and your team. Now let's try to add a new page. First of all, let's click here. Yeah, first of all, we can see that we're starting from the local. We can start from any environment, but we start from local because we build it on local first, and then we go to staging, production, etc. So let's create a URL let's call it plumbers. Okay, so this is going to be a dynamic URL called plumbers. The title is going to be plumbers. Meta description, we can say this is a page for plumbers. This is used for SEO reasons. And then we can say plumbers in London, comma, plumbers in Kent. So this is the meta keywords again, and we can say that this is going to be indexed by search engines, and let's click save. Now let's have our first component. Obviously, one second, yeah. So here again, this is not just a picture of the UI components. We interact with a real component, and we can add initially, let's add the hero component. Okay, so at the moment everything is null because we don't have any values, but let's try to add some values. So I can edit the props of this component at runtime. So I'm going to say this is my store. On the paragraph, okay, when I created my model, I chose that this paragraph is going to be a rich editor and not just a text field. This is your responsibility as a developer to put the right balance of access. What do you want your non-tech people to be able to do? As a UI developer, I have to build my React component and I have to make it very generic. This allows non-technical people to change the content. Bear in mind that by adding dynamic props, I'm not limited only on making aesthetic changes to my website, but I can also change the behavior. If I had a form with a validation rule, let's say if age is greater than 30, I can change this to if greater than 50 without changing a single line of my code. I can do everything dynamic here. So let's add at the moment the paragraph. This is my paragraph, and let's just make some modifications to this. Let's make this purple, and just let's change also to bold. Okay, so I have some flexibility here to this field to add something more rich than just string. And here let's put a text for this CTA. We call it demo, and this we call it buy now. So when I click save, I can see a real preview of my component as I just put the props at the moment. Now let's preview it. So when I click preview, I can see I'm in my localhost and /plumbers. So the plumbers page is a dynamic page. I never had to put this page anywhere, hard code this page anywhere. This is a runtime page. At the moment, as we can see here, the component at hero is not on the best position on the page, and this is something we couldn't predict when we built initially the component. As a side note here, when we develop our UI components, we must not keep in mind where the component will be placed. Therefore, we must build our UI components always with the padding and margin set to 0. I can go back to the tool now and edit the CSS. Okay, let's add some margin. So I'm going to say that I want 30 pixels margin, click save. As we can see, let's put maybe 50. As we can see, the margin already affect on my preview here. So if I just come back to this page and click refresh, we see that the margin now is fixed. So the component itself went a little bit down. We can do more things. We can just, if we want to do a small change, we can change background color to let's say red. I know it's not going to be look nice, but it's just an example. So this way we can change the CSS wrapper component. So you don't have to necessarily hard code all of this stuff. You can make changes on the props and the CSS from this tool. The changes I did right now affect only this instance of your component. If I import this component again, it's going to be look exactly as it was looking before by the default default background, default props, and then you can change anything you want. So this way you can reuse things, and you build them in a generic way, and then you reuse them and change it as many times as you want. So let's try to go to another page that I have built before. This is called store. Okay, so in the store page we have some components here. We have a hero component first, second we have a product list component, and I'm going just to preview this so we can see. Okay, so this is my page now. This is the store page. We have two components, one after the other, and here we have the product list component, where product list have inside products. Let's have a look what is happening on the product list. Okay, I click edit props. So CMS driven automatically converts your component props to beautiful UI forms that everybody in the team can edit without having coding skills. CMS driven supports all kinds of data types as strings, integers, booleans, images, and even rich editors. So as per our definition in the product list component, as our per own the definition, the product list component consists of an array of products, and every product is a JSON object, as we talked before. CMS driven automatically adds a new product button on the right side, and when I click on it, I'm going to get another product form. So this is going to be my product 3. And then I can change, for example, the image is going to be a hat, and I'm going to change the name here to hat, and this is going to be hat. I can make this red. Okay, now let's save this. As we can see now, we just add dynamically another product, and we were able to see the changes in here before we even set it to the preview and before we even deploy this. Now, you saw before that I upload an image. So an image can be uploaded to a CDN that is included within the CMS driven tool, and this returns back to us a CDN link and automatically fits the prop of your component with the CDN link. And this is because we set this image prop to be an image on our model. So is this the end? No, CMS driven allows you to implement the concept of feature toggles. Let's say we want just to remove something from the screen. We can always delete this component and we can remove it from the screen. Or if we want to add something, let's say on the top of our screen here, like an urgent message. For example, we experience a lot of calls at the moment in our on our call center. Please try later. Just an example. You can do things that you cannot predict when you build the website in the first place. So your website must be dynamic. As a summary of what we discussed today, I will say that building a component library, it's an essential part of your project. You should be creative, but at the same time, try not to get crazy with this. Focus on reusability, but do not over-engineer your solution. Try to not repeat yourself and focus on quality of the code. I'm happy to receive your questions and answer as many as I can, but reach out to me at any time this event finishes at my email, Twitter, or LinkedIn account that I have here. So stay safe and thank you for listening. Hi, so let's see now the questions. One of the questions is, how does CMS driven generate the form? Is it based on props type, or do you have to add annotations in your code? So the answer here is automatically handling this by the props types. So when you register your component to a CMS driven platform, you add the prop types and you say this prop is an image, this prop is a text, and automatically converts them to a forms. And as I showed you before, when you click the button, if it is an array of products, automatically adds a new button on the right that's saying add new product. So automatically figure out from the props and generates this on runtime. This answers this question. I don't know if you have any other question at the moment, or I can get some questions from Pervin and Kristian until we get another one on the feed. Do you guys have any question about the product?
I'm curious about. So I've used something like headless CMS before.
Yeah.
And with that particular product, you could subscribe to like a feed of like real-time data, basically. So that real-time, when you changed it in the CMS, you would real-time get the updates in your client apps. So do you have to support for that?
I don't have a support for real-time changes, but if you will have to refresh the page to see the change of the content. But this is a very rare scenario, I think, of real time, because if you imagine, only 10, around, not even 10, maybe 5% of the apps out there are real time, because most of the cases you handle content with, you have to refresh the page to get the newest content. I don't believe it's a high priority at the moment, but maybe if people want it, I can add it as an extra. But yes, at the moment it's not real time. You have to make making HTTP request behind the scenes, like to fetch the new data. Pervin, what about you?
I should have seen about your application, the SAS platform, like a few days ago, so that I could have used it in my project. So
Nice.
It's actually good. I was just wondering, what is that URL things which you are listing out, like 10 URLs, 20 URLs, something like that, 10 pages or 20 pages, something like that?
Yeah, so you can create as many pages as you want. I can tell you, for example, I have given this product to John Lewis. And John Lewis, I don't know if you know the company, because it's not everybody from UK. It's a big company here in London. So what they did, we had a project. It had to do with, it's called Home Solution. So we sent plumbers, electricians to people's houses and to fix some issues. And we had to do a very specific SEO approach where you have to put a specific page, let's say plumbers for London, plumbers for Kent, plumbers for Brighton. And this is because this boosts your SEO on top because you are localized now. You provide a localized service. And they had to build many pages. So the pages was around 300 pages in total. This was impossible to build 300 pages by hand, hard code them on with a traditional way. You create a router and put all these components there. So it was a way to solve this issue, creating unlimited, like many pages in a short time period. And yeah, I had another question here actually. It was about. Okay, I think it's a good idea. It seems to me this is more like a website builder with your own components. Yeah, so this is the idea. The idea is you provide your components because everything comes to your personal project. It's not a CMS like WordPress. It's not a ready-made solution. You leverage your custom components, your custom UI needs, because you will have probably a UI UX expertise in your team. You will build your components, your designs, and the only thing you do, you just give a flexibility to non-technical people in your team to go and change the content for you, or create another page. Let's say you created a 2-paragraph page, a component, and they can just reuse it and just change the content. You don't have to rebuild it again from the beginning. So this is going to save you a lot of time in the long run because you have built a UI component library that you are proud of. You have perfected it, and then people can still reuse this component library to build more and more pages dynamically. So can CMS-driven handle escaping strings? For example, if I add a script tag, will that load? So this is an option you can handle with your components. So in your component, nothing changed on the way you do your components. There is a way in React and in all the frameworks out there and libraries that you can escape HTML. By default, it's escaping the HTML, but you have to put a special tag to not escape the HTML.
It's dangerously set in inner HTML.
Yeah, so if you put this tag in your component, this means you can even provide an HTML script to run intentionally to your website. So you understand the security risks this might have, but this is up to your design to do. So there is a flexibility to use it as any case you want. So you can do this, or you can just use the strings coming in and straightforward stuff. That's it from me. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good job. Monolith or modules, using microservice concepts in React. A few words about me. My name is Kristian Mandrup. I taught myself how to code BASIC back in 1985 when I was just 11 years old. I've been an IT professional for over 20 years, since before the internet took off. Find me under Kristian Mandrup in one word on GitHub. I mostly experiment and create my own tools, libraries, and frameworks. I also contribute to open source that I find interesting and valuable. I've been through so many languages, frameworks, and technologies that I don't really care about the specific technologies anymore. When you've been at this long, you come to understand that it is all about using architectural concepts and engineering practices, not about the specific technology. Technologies come and go, the best concepts and practices stay the same. Architecture and teams, divide and conquer. In a typical modern architecture, we still use a monolithic frontend. A modern backend, however, is typically designed as a set of decoupled microservices. This presentation will look into how we can reuse concepts of microservices for the front end, also known as a micro frontend. Note that a modern full-stack app is often divided into 3 distinct layers: the front end, the API connecting front end and back end, and of course the backend. Ideally, we would like a fully decoupled architecture, i.e. no direct dependencies, where any of these layers can be changed without impacting the other layers. In the full stack, each engineer will have to work on and master the full system, front to back. Each team and engineer might work across the vertical layers or horizontal business domains, or both. We would prefer for each team to own a specific business domain, a bounded context, front to back, each forming a separate application. When adding a new feature, we would need a lot of communication between teams when using a layered team split. When using micro-frontends, however, each team fully owns a new feature, meaning little to no inter-team communication is required. The specialist teams each consist of specialists for a specific layer in the architecture, whereas each cross-functional team consists of a set of different specialists spanning the entire workflow to implement a given feature. Each cross-functional team has a specific mission in terms of delivering business goals with business metrics, as opposed to engineering goals, which is typical of the specialist teams. In a micro-frontend, each team is responsible for a set of separate pages or fragments that make up a separate micro-app that is fully decoupled from the rest of the application. The applications are assembled and composed in a shell or container application. This means that the development process scales much better as the project grows, with the same benefits seen for microservice architectures. The React Monolith, trouble in paradise. In a monolith front-end app, typical for most React web or mobile applications, the app is most often partitioned per layer, as was the standard in MVC frameworks such as Ruby on Rails. We often see one folder for the App Store or model. The controllers are the selectors, reducers, and API integration, such as thongs or sagas. The specific controller methods might be grouped by business domain or by specific controller method type, i.e. one folder for all the API functionality and so on. The view is a React component, rendering a view model state and using dispatch to communicate events back to the controller. The view often contains its own business logic as well, i.e. an MVC model in itself. Some of the main problems with the monolith approach. Most of the code is not collocated. Tests are often not collocated. It has a high complexity. It has mental overhead, keeping track of code dispersed across the code base. It results in merge conflicts, lack of good structure, all or nothing releases, difficult to onboard new team members, and development does not scale well as complexity grows. Modules. Ideally, we would prefer modular design where each module contains all the logic to implement a specific bounded context. It would be much better with a modular approach, i.e. micro-frontends. Ideally, each such micro-frontend would live in a separate repository, just like a microservice. The benefits of this modular approach are as follows. Code is collocated. Tests are collocated. It has a minimal complexity and minimal mental overhead. Merge conflicts are quite rare. The module is the implicit structure, so it has strong cohesion built in. Small independent releases are possible. Easy to onboard new team members, as it is quick to understand, simple and an independent module. It scales well. Complexity is linear per module. One ring to rule them all. Redux or Flux. The Flux architecture, such as Redux, is essentially no different than classic MVC, a unidirectional data flow. The view subscribes to a specific subset of the model through a selector. On user interactions with the view, actions are dispatched to the controller, which may communicate with one or more external systems, i.e. side effects, before reducing the model to a new state, which is then reflected back in one or more views. The views can be seen as materialized views, a database concept. Good engineering principles dictate that the views should be stupid, i.e. little to no business logic. Controllers should also be stupid, mostly just message conversion back and forth. Models ideally should also be stupid, just like tables in a database, which leaves dedicated business services to implement the core business logic. Clearly, the typical React component architecture with Redux does not really adhere to engineering best practices of MVC. Components are most often mixing view, controller, and model logic so that complexity gets out of hand. Redux does not really have a separate service entity for placing application business logic, also meaning dispersal of the logic. This all means that logic is fragmented across the stack, making it difficult to maintain and upgrade. This also makes it very difficult to port the MVC partitions to new technologies. The main issues with Redux is a meaningful framework, which means little to no heavy lifting is done by the framework itself. It has a lack of strong conventions beyond a structural guideline. It leads to a lot of manual hand wiring, no specific place for business logic. It's all dispersed across the stack. It's difficult to reason about and debug. On a personal note, when I first started using React, I was initially very excited. But I was quickly frustrated with the amount of boilerplate required when using Redux, which led me to write a generator to help generate all the boilerplate for me. However, code is a liability, and having to use a generator is really a code smell. I ended up discarding React initially for a long time due to a lack of a sufficiently good state management solution. One ring to rule them all. Take two. Microservices. In a microservice architecture, we have an API that takes one or more incoming events that are then dispatched onto the event stream. All events on the stream are logged in an event log, which makes it possible to replay any part of the complete application event history. Services can subscribe to the stream, selecting specific events of interest for the service. The service maintains its own store, also a materialized view. The service can publish new events on the stream, such as the result of processing an event. A view store can subscribe to specific data events, generating a materialized view. A broadcaster service can listen to the event stream or log and broadcast specific events to other clients to keep them in sync. An API request may also use a broadcaster linked to a view store to provide a specific view of the app, such as a particular domain or domain model. Some of the advantages of the microservices architecture. We use publish subscribe instead of point-to-point communication, which means much better decoupling. We have the complete event history stored, which allows us to playback, tracing, and much more. We can enable independent releases very easily. Technology can be changed incrementally or case by case by substituting or modifying services. It's easy to onboard new team members. All functionality is in its place and not dispersed across the stack, and it's easier to scale in terms of performance, and there are many more benefits. The view acts as the input API, dispatching events to the event stream. The view also acts as the output API, selecting events from a materialized view, i.e. the view store. An API service subscribes to the event stream or a view store to dispatch API calls to external systems. Another API service subscribes or calls an external API to retrieve data published as events on the event stream. The event stream thus acts as the unified gateway between all actors in the system. To put this into practice, we can use the browser message bus API, possibly with Polyfill for inter-app communication, i.e. for communication between the different micro frontends. We can use Seneca.js as a unified transport layer. It supports many different transports on both the front and back end. And we can use RxJS as the event stream infrastructure. We can group the microservice parts into the following. React component, i.e. the view IO. Service, view store, which is a materialized view of the app store, and an API integration service. We can furthermore partition the React component into its own MVC pattern to follow good engineering practices. Note that the MVC partitioning is most relevant for components that both take and display input, such as the forms. A React MVC component might look as follows. The view publishes a view event. The controller subscribes to the view event and translates it to a business event. The business event is then used to reduce the local state via the model. The model validates the event and the state is reduced. The view is updated optimistically either with the error or the new reduced state. The controller dispatches a successful business event to the event stream for further processing by services. The architecture sketched out might look a bit complex at first sight. However, due to the strict adherence to good engineering practices and conventions, we can drastically simplify the code footprint while capturing all the benefits of a very clean architecture. Don't write code. Write code that writes code. Encapsulate patterns. Boilerplate simply does not scale. Let's look at some sample code now. Notice here that the view has a model and a controller. The view is completely stupid, having no logic other than dispatching of events. Good engineering practices for views. Sample product controller code. Here we simply subscribe to a product event and forward the data to a form controller. The product validator class is responsible for validating the product and belongs to the model. The base view model, and base view controller encapsulate the core patterns. In reality, much more of the code could be parked here, so that entity-specific code in most cases almost entirely disappear, relying on built-in conventions. Also note that we should avoid inheritance favoring composition in real life. Using composition, we can substitute functionality as needed, replacing our conventions and core infrastructure logic in one fell swoop with a simple change of configuration. This also makes adding logging and metrics much easier. Here's an example of a base form controller. Again, we should really use composition. Notice how elegant and easy to follow the code is. This code would apply to any form across the entire app. The business service contains business logic and should consist of a model and a controller class. The API service should consist of a model, API, and a controller class. The controller subscribes and publishes events to the event stream. The API communicates with the API gateway. The view store is a materialized view and should consist of a model and a controller class. The controller should subscribe to the event stream. The full micro app would look as follows. Components, i.e. views, business services, view stores or materialized views of the application store, and API services. This pretty much mirrors the backend architecture, so we have a unified architecture from front to back. The full application would consist of the micro frontend, which is a micro app, and a micro backend, which is also a micro app in itself. The full micro app would implement the front to back functionality for a specific bounded context. The micro app can be versioned and released as a whole, being fully independent and isolated with no direct dependencies. The micro frontend and micro backend can also be released independently. We can ensure the backend doesn't break on incoming API messages by validating and discarding messages that don't conform to expectations. The same can be done to the front end. This ensures that if we release different versions of either front end or back end, the system will still work as expected and won't break. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Yeah, I don't see anything. It's because I have my... Wait. Okay,
Yeah, so you have one question, Kristian.
Only instead of using events that you don't want components to hold state, since another component might want that data as well. So someone is asking about the kind of state like in the component, but is still exposed outside the component. So this is where the concept of a materialized view comes into place, which is kind of similar to oh shit. So for example, when you're updating the local state, like the optimistic update, you still send the event with the data down on the event stream, where you can update the what I call the view store, the materialized view, which then another component or other components in your application can subscribe to. So that's the way you kind of share from component to component. You guys have any questions?
I have a question for you, Kristian. So in this architecture of microservices concept, if one of the app went down for any reason, do you have any effect on the whole application? How is going to behave if one of the app, let's say something is broken in one of them?
Yeah, so for that you really have to look into like these micro front-end frameworks, such as there's a very famous one now called Single Spa. And the way it works is that in the shell application, you have different tags in the body, and then you have like you have an application router that routes on the application level. And if one application is down, that will simply not be routed to on the application level, but the rest of the application will still function. And then you can have also like fallbacks, like you were saying, like we talked before, like server-side rendering. Like you might render like in a kind of progressive web application kind of way, where you still render from the server side a suitable, application, and then you progressively enhance, like you rehydrate on the client side. But if one application goes down, I mean, yeah, the other applications would still work. And you only communicate by sending events, so you will basically just not have any events from that particular application.
I see. Do you think any issue on the speed because you have now too many applications to run, when before you had only one? Is there any chance that the speed is impacted if you take it in a milliseconds? Let's say from if you have one SPA, or now you have many applications running together.
So there's no real difference compared to like having a monolith application. Like the only difference would be if you had like in a single spa, like a micro front-end application, you could have like you could mix like Angular, Vue, React, Svelte, vanilla JavaScript, whatever. And of course there would be an overhead if you choose like 5 or 6 different frameworks, or you could even have like different versions of React at the same time, right? Which is an advantage in terms of you being able to progressively upgrade your application. You can kind of slowly, like step by step, migrate to a new like preferred version or framework. But of course, having all these different frameworks is an overhead, so there's a cost there. But there are ways to manage in general. Like if you, for example, have 2 micro front-ends that are using, for example, the same version of React, they can share that. So then you would use something called import maps. So import maps is like the kind of next generation of using these, also like lazy loading, for example.
Yeah.
So actually, in a lot of times, a micro front-end app is actually more performant, because you would automatically use all these kind of lazy loading mechanisms and everything. So you would only load the code that is needed for that particular state in the application.
Nice. You have also one question on the chat, if you want to answer to this one also. Yeah. You can choose one of them.
Yeah. So there's a guy who's asking, how would you stitch these microfrontends together? Is it using iframes? Yeah, that's a pain. Of course, it's not using iframes. So again, I would recommend someone to read Microfrontends in Action from Manning. It's the book that I read. I use some of the some of the images from that book, and it explains all these different approaches, like from iframes all the way to what is called the unified single page application, which is kind of the recommended ideal kind of way of doing it. And you're just stitching them together basically by basically mounting, like like a React app or whatever app it is on these elements in the main page. And then you have like a main router that switches between which one's active given the current state of the application. So yeah. What's your take on using state charts as a formalized layer for event stream handling? Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. So that's something I looked into about a year or two ago. I think actually it's a really good idea to really kind of manage your application using something like a state machine. So again, you could have a state machine subscribing to the events and then somehow managing the actual state of your application. So, I mean, that's just another kind of service that you could integrate into the event stream, subscribing to specific types of events, and then publish other events that then again would affect the routing. So this whole kind of mechanism would perhaps also go against the typical way of using like the React router, and instead having a much more like the routing just being some kind of state that triggers display of the view, and not being specifically around the components in terms of like JSX stacks, for example.
Okay, sure. So next talk is going to be mine, and right now a lot of people are looking into how better we can do on their SEOs and other things. And here is where React and SEO gonna get into together. So how you are gonna generate static pages using React static. So I mean, like, sorry, it's a React Snap, but yeah, static pages using React.js. So this is what is my talk about, and this is something which I'm currently working on, and which I kind of like tried and tested it, and now it's going to be all yours. Hi everybody, hope you're all coping up well with this pandemic situation, staying safe at homes. This is Praveen Kumar. You can find me on the internet under the footprint of Praveen Science, and I do have a website which is praveen.science. If you don't know who I am, you can go there and check me out, get to know about me, find me on a bunch of social networks, talk to me, and I would love to chat. Okay, let's going on to today's topic. It's about creating static sites using React.js. Okay, so you might ask me, when you say something about React.js, it is going to be a dynamic website, because React.js is a JavaScript library that actually generates single page web applications using JavaScript routing and a lot of things. So let's start with why I need React.js when I start to think about a static site. The first reason is React.js is client-side rendering. So I feel as a developer more comfortable and confident with working on React.js and trying to develop a website. And one more thing which I really love about React.js is it is built on JavaScript, and coming from a PHP background myself, I know, don't throw stones at me right now. I'm not using PHP anymore, but I would love to use PHP in a better way, which I'll come back later. Okay, so when it comes to building static sites, there are a lot of repeated patterns and elements which are supposed to be um, kind of violating the do not repeat yourself principle. So that is one of the principles which I really love to follow in almost all my software development applications. Now, when it comes to React, we have this component based rendering kind of a technique. So React components are, the React.js actually works based on components. So all the parts in React.js, whether it is pages, whether it is um, structures, sections, etc., everything can be componentized. It's a component based programming. And in this case, if a website, like let's say a marketing website or a static site which is mainly used for marketing purposes with 5 or 6 pages, they all contain almost similar patterns in their website, right? You could have seen a lot of companies that have the same similar types of buttons, similar types of widgets that can be reused in most of the places in a website. So thinking about all these things, if I start writing a HTML and CSS for this, it's definitely gonna take me ages. The first thing which I would say is, for writing a HTML and CSS is actually an old school thing, because no one at this point of time uses CSS for anything other than um, maybe building the static site and then deploying it. Even now, all the static site servers are capable of compiling on the run. Like for example, we have a lot of things like now.sh, search.sh, etc. They all kind of like give you abilities to compile the uncompiled sources. For example, you can have something like SCSS that can get compiled to CSS. You have something like HAML that can be compiled into HTML. You have handlebars. Um, you have Pug, etc. Jade. So those kind of things will help you in templating and other things. Now the world is moving towards templating and other things, and when I was working with PHP, there was this thing called WordPress. I don't want to recommend anything about WordPress or say anything about it, because it is one of the most vulnerable thing. And for people who are looking for static sites, I don't think WordPress will be a good reason, because static sites are meant to be very powerful, very fast, very efficient, because they don't have anything on their back end. So there are no database accesses, there are no um, file accesses in case of static sites. All you need to do is just pick up the HTML and then render it on the browser. And the good part about this is you can give a browser cache expiration to a huge limit, so that every static asset can be cached completely or indefinitely, so that the site will behave very faster on the subsequent visits. Now, why, when I want to create a static website, why did I choose React.js? That would be the first question most of the people will think of. Fine, let me answer it this way. So first thing, React is component based, and I don't need to repeat myself for creating the same widgets for each site, each page. um, let's take an example. Let's say if I have the header and footer, and I built it using copy paste technique on each and every HTML page that I build, and let's say this particular website has about 20 plus pages, and if there is a change, I can, by default, I can definitely blindly do a find and replace all the files with the changes that are required. But what if there are a few pages? Let's say I have a home page, I have an about page, I have a features page. And when I click on about page, the class names of the about link needs to be different because it is the active page. And this renders each and every page to not be the same as all the pages. So this gives a big problem of finding and replacing the whole thing. So considering all these things, why not I develop the whole site in React? And the reason being, I can use components. I can also use SCSS, which is one of the most powerful CSS technique that I can think of. The reason why I'm using SCSS is, number one, I can split the code between the pages. For example, if I have one particular widget, I can write the widget code on that particular file, and then I can import it back to my home. like the whole SCSS page. And the next thing which I can do is use of mixins. So mixins are like functions in JavaScript to your CSS. CSS doesn't normally have variables on the client side, but even if we do the client side variables right now, we are not going to give a lot of trouble to the end browsers, which is not exactly is a requirement at this stage. So why not we kind of create the whole compilation part during the development phase, and then once we develop completely and if we are happy with it, why don't we like compile the whole thing into a static CSS, static HTML and static JavaScript and deploy it. That will be super fast, very much cacheable, and then it would be more better and best for the servers to serve. So this is the main idea and motivation behind this talk for today. Let's kind of get on to a demo where I will share my screen and show you what exactly I'm doing with a React.js application and what are all the different static site generators I'm using with React.js and the one which worked for me the best. All right. Now let's jump into a complete demo, like a live demo. Let me start by explaining about my current system setup. So I'm using a Macintosh machine and it is a bit old because I'm using a Mac OS 12, which is Sierra, which came a long back, and it's perfectly fine to use this. And then right now, I'm also using Visual Studio Code for my IDE purpose or a text editor purpose. And then I'm using Google Chrome for my development purpose. And then a lot of different plugins, which I will be explaining you now. So when it comes to Visual Studio Code, you can do a lot of things with React. So Visual Studio Code supports you in a lot of different ways. First thing, it has a built-in terminal which will help you in running the terminal commands. For example, if you want to run any server from the command line, that can be possible from inside the Visual Studio Code environment. And then you have a built-in Git repository tracker as well. So this has an initialization of Git repository and a lot of things that can be done out of the box from React, uh, from Visual Studio Code, sorry. And then we have a lot of plugins that might be able to supercharge your developer abilities. So I would be going through quickly what are all the plugins that I'm using and then all the extensions that I'm using. The first thing which you could see is I've got Cobalt 2 theme. It is actually by Wesboss. I really like the videos by Wesboss and his theme is really nice. So what I did is I did a modified version of the Cobalt theme, and this is not the real theme. It looks very bluish, but I like the grayish format. So it's a crossover between Sublime Text Monokai theme and then Cobalt 2's Cobalt theme. And I'm generally using this particular extension, which is ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets, which actually helps me in a lot of things. For example, all I need to do is with these things, I just need to enter 3 or 4 characters and it's going to write the code for me, which is really helpful in case of like faster development. Then I've got ESLint, which is going to help me with checking the JavaScript code for all the correctness. And then this is also helping me in making sure all the JavaScript that I have written is on standards. Then I've got this Git history and Git lens. I don't think Git history makes any sense right now, but Git lens very much. So in case if I'm using Git lens on any file, it can clearly show me who has been changing the file in the recent past. Also, it does give a kind of like, a file history on what all things that has been done. Let's go to Prettier. This is one of the most used extensions that I would recommend for everyone. Although we should be concentrating on writing indented pretty code, we should be mainly concerned about writing the code itself. So Prettier takes care of the indentation and even the spacing, etc. And it is completely configurable whether you are a fan of trailing spaces or not a fan of trailing commas like me. I don't like trailing commas. And then there are a few more cosmetic plugins which I would like to say. One is to do tree, and this one actually gives you a clear idea of where all the to-dos are available in your source code. This helps you in kind of like removing all the to-dos or making everything perfect. The next thing is VS Code icons. This is more completely a cosmetic one. It actually shows you all the icons for those which we are working on. Now I can show all these things in demo by getting into creating a small web application. So let's go ahead by installing create React app and then starting with a initializing with a new React application. I'm using npx here, which means it is going to download the create React app, execute it, and then remove it from the memory. This is very much easier because you don't need to stuff your memory with all these things. So this npx is not a typo, it's a real command. So we will go ahead by putting npx create react app and using dot here so that it is going to install my boilerplate on the same directory. At this point, we have installed a React application boilerplate in our current directory, which you can see it successfully installed here by looking at these things. So let me first make this whole zoom into this whole thing so that it looks a lot better. Now, the first thing what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna arrange all these files based on their base. This is the first thing I will generally do with almost all the React applications. So when I go to this folder, the src, all I need to do is I create 4 different files, one for components, one for assets, one for styles, and another one for tests. So what I'm going to do is anything related to styles, I'm going to put that inside the css files. Okay, the first thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up all these things because we don't require all these. So first thing, I'm going to get rid of the app.css. I don't need the index.css, and I don't require the logo.svg. Now all we require is this app.js and app.test.js. So first thing what I will be doing is I'll be putting the app.js inside the components and app.test inside the tests. So if I go back to our VS Code, you can see that these things have been changed. Now, the first thing which I will be doing here is I'll go to the index.js file and I'm going to get rid of this import and update this import to use the components slash app.js. So since it's going to be a JavaScript file, I don't need to do .js here. So without changing anything else, which we don't require anywhere, we are just going to save this. So once we save this, you can automatically see that the Prettier is doing its magic by converting all the quotes into double quotes and other things. The next thing which we are going to do is going for the styles. So I don't really require a CSS file, but instead I'm going to use a SCSS file. So when I do SCSS file, I need to obviously import this SCSS file. So going to the index, I'm going to do only import only once. So import styles app.scss. Now to make this app.scss run correctly, we need to install another module, which is node.sass. So I'm going to install npm install nodessass, which is the compiler for scss and sass files. The moment we install this, all these SCSS files can be used now. The main reason why I am using SCSS is, as explained, I can keep all the file sizes to the minimum possible. One particular file cannot be more than 100 lines. That is what is my personal suggestion for everyone, because once it goes more than 100 lines, it is hard to debug or manage. Now, since that I have updated this app, I need to go to the test file also, and then I need to update this too. So all I need to do here is I need to use components from the parent directory and app inside that. And what I need to do is I need to go change this one from learn React to React static. So once I do this and try to run npm test, it should be probably passing. So it's going to run the test, and let's wait. And it says it's failed. Right. The reason is we haven't got React static in our app.js. Let's quickly go to our components and app.js and get rid of everything. So now comes the power of using the React.js snippets. All I need to create here is an exported functional component called app. So if I put RAFCE, it's going to create an arrow function, a React arrow function component with an export. So that's it. All I need to do here is I need to do React static, and then I need to save it. The moment I save it, it's going to run the test again, and it's going to say it is passed. Once we are happy with the test, we will just close it for now, because this is not a test driven development. So, and by the way, test driven development is really good, so please don't ignore it. If your company is asking you, or your organization is asking you to do a test driven development, please support them. All right, let's carry on. Now we are forgetting about the test, and we are going to start running the application. So right now I'll open up my one of my browsers. I personally recommend Google Chrome, because it has all the, all the all the plugins that are required, plugins or extensions that are required for you to like use this and to work on. So let's go ahead and start building our site. So if I do npm start here, obviously it's going to start the React.js server. It is going to start the development server, and it's going to tell us that it is running at line number, port number 3000. And now we have got React static in our page, where this is what is going to be our site. Now the first thing which you can see is it is actually reading the SCSS file, because we have imported it and it is not complaining. So right now let's try out a few things that are working only in SCSS. Let's say we will go with the variables. So I'm going to put something like a color variable, and then I'm going to give an orange color. So orange color is FFA 500, which I personally like. So I'm going to change this to orange as well. And then I'm going to go for a body, and then I'm going to create something like background color is going to be light orange. So I'm just going to use an RGBA here in this case. So the color is going to be obviously orange, and then the alpha value is going to be like, let's say 0.75. And then if I save it, it's actually rendering the colors correctly. So this means we have the support of SCSS. And moreover, when you try to inspect this element and try to see what is the color that's body has, it's gonna be RGBA 255.165.0, 0.5. It is not exactly an orange here, or it's not gonna show us as hash FFA 500, 0.75, which are all invalid in CSS. So it is correctly converting it into RGBA values and then rendering it. This is one more power of SCSS. Now let's get rid of this one, and then try to set our font family to be Open Sans, and then this is going to be our default font, so that it looks a bit better. Right. Now let's kind of like try to understand what exactly we are trying to do here. So we are trying to build a static site through React.js, and we require some kind of a framework. For now, let's use Bootstrap, because everyone knows how to use Bootstrap. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to bootstrapcdn.com and then pick up the Bootstrap code, just the CSS part. And then what I'm gonna do is I'll go to the public HTML file, the index.html, and then I'm gonna change all these things to what I wanted. So this is gonna be a React static site, and then I will be adding a link which is for CSS, and I'll be adding the bootstrapman.css. So the moment I added, it automatically updated the title as well as our styles. Since the margins are gone, I could safely assume that our bootstrap styles are actually being taken into account. Let's close all the other files that are not required. And then the other reason why I am using Bootstrap, why I'm using SCSS is now I can use something called partials. Let's say I have another page which is called as a home page, and I would be putting all these files in home.scss with an underscore. So the moment I put an underscore here, and if I try to import here, I can just first thing I can import different files inside the CSS. And if I try to add this, I can add this as a partial. Now inside this file, if I try to use a home, and let me actually add the app as well here. So this way I'm also able to nest the files so that I don't need to create multiple rendering of files. Now the first thing which I'm gonna do here is let's start with the nav bar. Okay, so we'll go to Bootstrap, get Bootstrap, and this is how basically I create a website based on Bootstrap. And if I need to use it on React, this is what I do. So if I go to the documentation and directly go for a nav bar, I'll just go with a simple nav bar. So a nav bar that just has just the brand alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this part alone, and then I'll just go to a new file here. So let's close these ones and let's go to the components, and I'm going to create a new file. And this is actually interesting because I'm going to create a shared header file. And now if I just type in shared slash header.js, Visual Studio Code automatically creates all the paths for you. So now all I need to do is do an RAFCE, and then I get this whole thing updated. So I'm just going to paste this here. Obviously, the first thing which you would see is React.js does not support class and a with a href equal to hash. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to quickly select all the classes and change them into class name, and then I'm going to change this a into span, which I can do using F2, and then I can get rid of this href equal to hash. And then once I save this, obviously I won't be able to see anything here. Now all I need to do is first thing is I need to use an app, and inside that I will start using the header. So if I try putting header here, it's going to auto import from the shared folder. So the moment I do this, it's going to show me the header here with the navbar here. So what I can do is I can also add a kind of like, a title, and then I'm going to use the title dynamically from the props. So this might help me in case if I need to change the title in any of these pages. So for now, we are not going to change title anywhere. So right now I'm going to use the title from here and putting as React static. So the moment I save this, it's going to auto refresh it, and then it shows me React static. And the main reason why I am not using the React.js site as it is because for SEO purposes, when you try to look at the views page source of a React.js file, it doesn't have anything else other than the title, and the content are not displayed here, which can heavily affect your SEO rankings and search engine optimization. So this is another main reason why we are using React static, and why we are using static site and not a React.js application for a simple site. Now, what is a site which doesn't have the links here? So what I'm going to do is now we need some kind of a router. So I generally prefer using React router DOM. So what I'm going to do is I create a new tab in the terminal, and then I'm going to install React router DOM. React router DOM helps us in routing techniques, and it is also very it's like a modular routing. So let me first install it, and then let's add that in our index.js directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a few things from the React router DOM. So now it's installed. It's also VS Code will also suggest you with what are all the inputs that we have done. So the first thing I need to do is I need to use a browser router, and I'm using it as a router because I don't need to use the browser router as a whole. So inside the strict mode, I'm going to do a router tag, and then I'm going to put that inside the app. Now, there is no difference that you can find it right now, but we need to use the different components to use the router, like for displaying the pages. Let's start with creating a few components. Let's start with two components, one being home, and then so this automatically creates all the HTML structure for me by using emmet, and then we can do the same thing for about page as well. So what I'm going to create is create a new file again as about/about.js. The reason why I am using a huge like a directory for each and every page is the pages might become bigger and they might have a lot of different sections in them. So for each section, I can use everything inside the same directory so that it is maintainable as well. That's the main reason, nothing else. So now I'm going to change all these home into about. So now since we have got all these things sorted correctly, all I need to do is go to the app.js where everything is being rendered, and then I need to create a switch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import from React router DOM. And what am I importing? I need to import a route. I'm importing a switch. So these are the two things which I'm importing right now. So what I'm going to do is first thing, I'm going to create a switch, and then inside that, I'm going to create a route. So this route will actually take a couple of arguments, couple of properties. So what we will be we will be self-closing this route as well. The first argument it's going to take up is the path. So we will be using the slash path for home, and since slash path is actually a filter pattern, it could also get to everything. So let's keep it at the first, and also we give the exact as true so that nothing else matches, and we will be rendering the component home from here. So home is going to be auto imported from the home page, and then the next thing what we are going to do is we will be trying to do a we can get rid of this exact equal to true and then use about here, and then let's use about as the component, and that gets auto imported from here as well. So the moment we save it, it's going to show us you are in home. And the first thing which we need to do is we need to change the header to add all the other links as well. So here in the header, we can add the links by using this one. So we can use another div to add the navbar items, and I'm just gonna use the same thing and gonna change it later. So as I said, you cannot use an anchor tag this way, and then we need to make sure we should be using something else. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get rid of these two anchor tags, and then and before doing anything, I'm going to change all these classes into class names. So now I would be using a special tag called link tag, and this is available from React Router DOM. So that has been actually imported right now, and now I need to use two and give a slash because it's going to go to the home page. And then I've got this one as well. So link to, it's going to be slash about, and then I'm going to use about as the text. So now when I save this, it's going to again show me the same thing. Like since it's a navbar collapse, I just need to get rid of these two things. Let's try to find out why these navbar links are not being displayed. So we need to have a show here. It's just a hack for now. So let's see how it gets displayed now. I'm sorry, it's a bit slow, but still we can't, we are not able to get this correctly because of this one. Right. Now I understand what exactly the problem is. I need to use the navbar expand here on the top of the navbar. So if I add this class and get rid of the collapse and show classes, now I would be able to see the answer. And one thing which I need to find is I need to have this nav link as the class for the link items. So I would be adding those two classes here using class name. And then once I save this, you can clearly see that the home is actually active and about isn't. So if I try to click on about here, it definitely shows, it goes to the about page, and then it is also showing us that the page has been changed to about. And clicking back and forward, it is definitely not going for the new pages. So it is just in the same page right now. So we have got our static sites working correctly. Sorry, we have got our routing working correctly at this point. So right now, what we need to do is there is another thing is called nav link. So if you try to check the nav link React router DOM, this will give you a way to use the nav link component so that on the correct nav tag, it's going to change the whole scenario. Like for example, so the active class name is one of the things that we will be looking for. So active class name is going to be, or you can use active style here. But unfortunately, since we have to use the active class here, we can get rid of this one from here, and then let's replace this with nav link. And then saving it has no different effect right now. But the moment we give this active class name here, it's going to change everything. For example, if we copy this one and add these two things for these two elements, and the active class name is going to be active, and then save it, then we can go inside our app.scss and then try to add one more SCSS called header, and then let's create one thing underscore header.scss, and then for the header we can quickly add this nav link. So how are we gonna do that? Let's go ahead and edit the header page. So if you go to the header.js, so one thing which you might notice is however I'm creating new files here on the components, I'm actually replicating on the styles as well, so that if you have anything that you need to change in header.js, the corresponding SCSS will be available in header.scss. All right. So let's go ahead and change the header file and try to find out what we have got here. So we have got navbar and we've got nav ID, and then we have got nav link. These are the three things that we have got right now with us. So if we save this and if we go to our header.scss, and then let's try to add these three things now. So all I need to do is all these things are inside each other. So that's actually a good thing. So one thing which I need to do is I need to save all these things. And since navlink has an active class, I need to use ampersand.active so that it's going to apply to the same thing. Now, all I need to do is I need to do a color and I need to give a black color instead of the normal color. So I just did that. And then if I try to clear this off and then click on this or click on this, so I can clearly see that this particular color is getting changed. For now, we can let's do something like 999 or something like that, so that it is going to be shown as a default dull color. Now, what I need to do is I need to go back to my header.js and then get rid of the active class from the nav item. I couldn't see any active class, but still I couldn't find the difference between these two colors. Anyway, I'm going to use a completely two different colors so that it looks completely different. So I'm going to go to our header.scss and let me use something like an F90, but still I couldn't get this color correctly coming in. So it looks really like a specificity issue. So right now, if I try to use the about here, I could see that both these things are rendered as active, which is kind of like a weird thing. So the current page, the both the yeah, that's weird. So I need to have a look at how active class name is needs to be given. Okay, the problem with this one is if I go to slash about, the slash is going to be obviously applied for home as well, and I believe that should be the reason it is not applied correctly. So always this home will be like a wrong color. So if I do one more thing, like let's say another path which says projects or something like that, and then if I give projects here and then make another route for this, and let me try with that one. So I go back to our app.js and then I create another thing called projects, and the component is going to be a project component which I can create from projects / projects.js. And here if I do an RAFCE and then give a div class name projects and your in projects inside a paragraph, so we can clearly see that it's currently in about, and if we click on the projects it's going to be displayed in a different way. So since the home is being matched with everything, it's going to show the same thing. So that's the only problem which we need to somehow handle. So let's see what we can do for that. So for now, we will just forget about that and let's continue on creating the static site here. So for now, since the main reason what I was doing is I wanted a way to use my SCSS like this. At the same time, I'm also able to separate the CSS as well, right? So this is what I'm doing it here. And at the same time, I'm also creating other files as well. So let me try to like do something like this, cp underscore home, and then I'm going to use underscore projects dot scss, and then the same way I'm going to change this into about dot scss. So now if I try to open projects and about dot scss, I just need to do a about here, and then I'll be changing this into projects. So now if I go back to my code in the JS files, all I need to do is, so home, I've got a class name home. In projects, I've got a class name projects, and in about, I've got class name about. And now I'm going to create another file which is going to be utils. So utils helps me in creating a lot of mixins. Let's start with the mixin here. So it is going to be a page wrap, and I'm going to give my top margin. So my, I would say margin on the y-axis. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a width of 1080 pixels, and then I'm going to give margin $my and auto. So this way the top and bottom margins will be based on whatever the my value is, and then auto will make it center aligned. So this page wrap is something which I'm going to use in all the page level SCSS. So now before doing anything, I need to first import these things. So I'm going to do at import, And since this is an utility, I'm going to import it on the higher level. So I could import this one, and then obviously I need to import the other files as well. So the first file is about, and the next one is projects. So now I have imported all these things, and then inside the utils, I've got this page wrap, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the home page, and then first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to include by using @include and page wrap by giving a 25 pixels margin. Now the moment I save it, I'm going to get the home correctly aligned to the perfect way. The same way, I'm going to do this include for all the other pages as well. So for projects, I'm going to do this. For about, I'm going to do this. So literally, I have just not, I haven't used any of the repeated codes anywhere. So it looks like the about page has some issues. Just a second. So the project page actually shows the about page. You're in projects, which is correct. And let's try the app.js. And this needs to show me the projects page. So if I'm going to the projects, it's going to show me the projects. If I'm going to the about, it's going to show me the about. So this is how it should work. And one thing which we need to see is the path needs to be exact. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the header.js again, and let's fix this part. So active class name should be active, but only when the home page is not, only when the route is not actually active. So let's quickly have a look at what exactly is happening here in terms of the component level. So if you see the header, it's gonna look at what all things that is being changed. But in the nav ref, there is something like, let's see if there is any nav link exact for us. So there is an exact value as well. So now what we will do is, since this one would select every single thing because it's now selecting all those things, right? So let's also add an exact here. So the moment we added exact, so it's going to show only the one which is exactly matching. So let's go back to our SCSS file and then update the header colors. So the normal color should be something like a 999, which is a dull gray, and then the active color should be dark color. So which we have done perfectly. Now let's go open up a kind of like a thing here like this, and then let's see. So right now we have got everything perfectly working fine, right? Now the problem with this is if you try to view the page source of this, it's gonna show us nothing but just the static bundles JS, and this is completely not working out in case of a SEO point of view. So we need to make sure these things are working with SEO. So what I tried first was a React static generator, which is React static. As the name says, it's going to try to create a progressive static site, but unfortunately for some reason it was not working. So I'm going to go with something called React Snap. So React Snap is the
Guys, so we're going to just take a pause for a second, and we're going to have a clap for the NHS. So we're hoping that you will all be able to join us. If you can head to the nearest window. Kristian's already got himself a nice setup. It's almost like he planned it earlier on. So I'm just opening my window at home in Blackheath in London now, as you might be able to hear. I can already hear people clapping here.
Right. Yeah, same here. I'm in Northwest. All right. Woo! I need to drink some water. Can't scream too much. All right. All right. People are banging pots here. Bing, 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 bing.
Yeah, we've got people banging pots here as well.
And banging tables or something. Wow.
There's normally fireworks that go off outside ours
Really?
as well.
I can see the sunset. Wow, it's beautiful. Orange.
There's the fireworks going now.
Yeah? Awesome. Okay. Sunset
Thanks
here.
for that, guys. Sorry for the interruption, but we'll let you get back to Praveen's talk.
Which is a dull gray, and then the active color should be dark color. So which we have done perfectly. Now let's go open up a kind of like a thing here like this, and then let's see. So right now we have got everything perfectly working fine. Right now, the problem with this is if you try to view the page source of this, it's gonna show us nothing but just the static bundles JS, and this is completely not working out in case of a SEO point of view. So we need to make sure these things are working with SEO. So what I tried first was a React static generator, which is React static. As the name says, it's going to try to create a progressive static site, but unfortunately for some reason it was not working. So I'm going to go with something called React Snap. So React Snap is this particular thing which is going to help us with SEO. It works out of the box with Create React App and without any code changes that are required. It also uses a real browser behind the scenes by running a headless Chrome, and it's gonna run the whole application, and then it's gonna generate everything. So what we need to do is, all we need to do is we need to install this React Snap here. So right now, since our our React.js site is looking perfectly fine, the only thing we need to do is change a few pages. So let's go ahead and change our index.js. So I'm going to close everything, go to the index.js. All I need to do is, first thing, I need to install this one. So let's do npm install React Snap, and then instead of importing the what do you call this, let's instead of importing the React DOM, I just need to use hydrate and render functions. And now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this part. So this is what I need to do, right? So I'm just going to copy the whole thing here and then paste it over here. So since we have got the document by get element ID root, we have done all these things perfectly. The only thing which we need to update is this particular part. So I'm just going to cut this one and remove these things. And instead of app here, I'm going to use this hydrate and render. The moment I save it, you don't find much difference here. It works as how it should work, with the routing, with all the SCSS, everything perfectly fine. Now, there is one more thing which I need to do with the React Snap. So all I need to do is inside the package.json, on the scripts, I need to create another script here. So it is called as post build. Post build runs once the whole build functionality is completed. So I'm going to create a post build and save it here. The moment I create something like this, I need to run the build, right? So right now, I don't have any of these build files right now. So the moment I do npm run build, it's going to do the same static site, but in a different way. So right now, if you see this, it's going to create only a few files, which is going to be your HTML file, your JavaScript file, and other things, which you can see right now here. Now, the moment it's going to create a snap, it is going to take exactly the snapshots and then it's going to create the whole thing here. So the moment you see this one, it is following the same logic, and then it is also creating the index.html and for each and every route here, and then you have the main route as well, and everything now statically works. So even if you don't have, like, let's go for this. Let's open the build folder and then try to run a PHP server. So it's going to run on my localhost port number 80, so that I just need to run the localhost. Okay, so if I try to use this, and you can say that it is actually working fine, because it's going to go to new pages, like it's going to travel to new pages. But one thing which we are not sure about is like what's happening internally. Like what if I kind of like disable the JavaScript, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to disable JavaScript here and then reload the page. It's going to work as good as before. So it just says you need to enable JavaScript to run this app, which is completely fine. And if I click on other pages, it's going to render perfectly fine. So it does have the automatic. So in case JavaScript is supported, it's going to use the single page application mode. But the moment JavaScript is disabled, it's going to use the normal static site mode. So this is actually helpful in a lot of ways, because if I go to view source, it's going to show me all these things already available here. So this way, it's going to help me with SEO, and it's also going to help us with, you know, componentization and SCSS. Everything is there. And if you have already a React.js application, you can just use this and convert your whole React.js application as a static website. So hope everyone has learned something on this. Please do give us the comments and let me know what your experience is. And if you have any other better ideas other than what I told you, that's also welcome. So hopefully this was a wonderful session, and see you all. Stay home, stay safe, and let's meet soon. Bye bye. And if you have already a React.js application, you can just use this.
I think I've got two audios
Whole React.js
going on at the moment.
static
Is anyone else?
Yeah. I guess it's somewhere from. I was like confused. What's happening actually? It's not. It's actually in sync.
It is in
I
sync.
was listening.
All right, thanks, man. So Praveen, you can just
Hey, sure. Let me have a quick look at the comments. There was not much questions here, but definitely any questions coming in, I can answer. So there is one comment saying like, interesting concepts, great. Is there a Git repo with other code examples? Yes. Uh, sure, you will be all the code here which was demoed will be updated in a Git repository and will be shared shortly as a comment. So I'll give it to Duncan or anyone from the Pusher team who can actually add it as a part of the YouTube video or in the description or something like that. Yes. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer.
So I will make a question for you, Pervin, until we have another one from the people. So you use a static generation or on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is very SEO friendly. Can you tell us why you choose this over the other ones that exist out there? What is the advantage that you get only from this one that you cannot find it from any other out there?
I believe, George, you're talking about Gatsby and other static site.
All the other solutions. Yeah.
So first thing is, I've not got much experience with Gatsby. I've used Gatsby a couple of times, but one thing I find was I was not able to like regen. I didn't. it was like some kind of like I was in a prison of using Gatsby in it. And one more thing which I found was with pure React.js. So the application which I developed or the pages which I developed are using pure React.js. So in that way, I can even go into the use kind of like arrays, objects, pass custom props based on your state. I can do whatever it is, but this is not possible with Gatsby. The second thing, or maybe it is not possible for me, like on figuring out how I could do with Gatsby. The second thing was with respect to the CSS, I'm using SCSS, so I'm not sure if I can change something with Gatsby because it comes with either CSS components or something like that. And moreover, the products which I have been like the projects which I have been worked on in React uses a lot of plugins inside them. For
Yeah.
example, Moment.js for time, then Axios for Ajax calls, and that's where a lot of problems come in. Like I use a lot of Axios for like bringing in external blogs and other things. So that part, I'm not sure how I would be implementing with Gatsby. And apart from this, the main reason why I went for React and um, actually React and React static method was I personally like componentization because I severely follow DRY principle, don't repeat yourself. And with React I can use a lot of components to make sure that I don't repeat myself. And secondly, I love SCSS a lot. So I just do one single import, and based on that import, it's going to be like, so the way I explained, for every component, the component structure, the same way I am using SCSS structure as well. So this kind of like I use like a breadth first approach. So which means all the components will be in one directory. So it's going to be like component, and there will be like style. So something like that. So so that's the way I'm using, not exactly with the way which a lot of people are doing in like a component will have all the different things. For example, if you come from a TypeScript background, you have records, you have types, you have styles, you have storybook, you have the component itself, and then the partials which it it is going to use up. So
Yeah.
but my methodology or the way I do is like completely using the breadth first. So all the components will be in one folder, all the assets will be in one folder, all the styles will be in one folder, and all the services will be in one folder. Then we have tests. So these are the 5 major folders which I generally have in a React application. And then all I need to do is I just need to convert it into static sites so that the SEO is better. So this is what I've been doing.
Yeah. Very good. Also, I just wanted to put a comment there on the test. I will also prefer the test to be on the same folder. There are two different approaches there. Some people prefer them outside. Some people prefer them inside. The reason why I will put them inside is in the same folder is because if I want to delete a module, I just delete the folder and all the code is gone.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Exactly. And if I want to extract this module to put it in a third library, the test itself, because everything that lives together is under one folder, so you can identify your code very easily. And it takes you not so much time now to deal with where is my code, where is my test, where is my CSS. As you said, everything under one module.
Agreed with you, but at the same time, I'm being a lazy person. I just wanted to make sure that imports are very easy for me.
Yeah.
That's the only main idea behind it.
Yeah, makes sense. Nice.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, guys. I've just jumped on here. I have been here the whole time, but I've had to just kind of leave you to it this evening because you've done such a very good job at kind of running this yourself. So you might put me out of a job. I'm not sure. But thank you all very much. Thank you to Praveen. Thank you, George. Thank you, Kristian. Thank you, Alex, who's been running away in the background from Pusher as well. We really couldn't be doing this without his expertise as well. So thanks, everyone, for joining in. We will be, sharing GitHub links. We'll be sharing repositories to all the code that we've talked about previously. Each of these talks will individually be broken down as well, and they will be shared on the Pusher YouTube channel and their Time to to React YouTube channel through that as well. So if you have any further questions or anything like that, I have posted everyone's LinkedIn profiles on here. Feel free to get in touch with them. I'm sure they would love to answer any questions that you've got. And if you're watching this, maybe tomorrow or whichever day it might be, you didn't get the chance to watch it live, then feel free to get in touch with these guys and repeat the questions as well. So thank you again very much. Thanks for you guys. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining and tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Right, awesome.
Thank you. Bye.
Guys.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with us, all of us on LinkedIn. We are happy to accept all the connections, and we are also happy to mentor or get your queries cleared or something like that.
Exactly.
Same here. Thank you.
Cool.
Bye, mate.
Have a good evening.
Thanks so much, guys.